Hi, this is Linda, and I was just thinking about my last video that I made on Roadblocks, and I realized that when I went back and looked at the video, I looked very overexposed. You really couldn't see my nose, which for an Armenian, might not be so bad, really. But I have roadblocks still on the mind. And speaking of overexposed, last week in our city, we had the fire, the big fire a few weeks ago, and then we were having the rains, and the rains were coming down, and there was a lot of concern that we were going to have mudslides because back in 1969, where we live, we had major mudslides after a fire and then a huge rain. And so the city was taking it very seriously. 2 blocks up from where we lived, there was mandatory evacuations. There were roadblocks again put up, and this time big, concrete blocks put up and sandbags to hold back the rain and the mud that they were expecting, actually the mud that they were expecting. And I was thinking about how sometimes in our lives we can have hard things that come up that leave us exposed, like those hills were exposed from the fire. And we can have things in our life. It could be an untimely death of someone that we love. It could be, a parent or someone who was supposed to love you, a spouse that didn't. um, so many things in our lives, someone we work with that, backstabs you, something that leaves you just exposed and hurt. And then the rains come, and like we see with mudslides, just just that mud just starts flowing, and these barricades are put up to hold things back. But sometimes in our life, if we have a lot of hurt, and I can speak for myself, it's hard to hold it back. Sometimes that hurt just comes oozing out, and it affects people around us. Um, I think about things that I don't understand. This last week, I went to a funeral for an infant. I don't understand those things. It brings hurt, and it's hard to understand. Or even Frank Pastore, the beloved radio announcer, and how he died in a motorcycle accident so untimely. I don't understand those things. There's a wonderful book that I love on forgiveness, and it talks about a man who was very, very overexposed by hurt, and he lost 3 generations in a car accident in one day. He lost his mother, he lost his wife, and he lost his daughter by a young boy who was driving irresponsibly. And they went to court, and nothing was done. Nothing was done. The boy got away with what he did. And I'm sure he has to live with that for the rest of his life. But this father was very hurt, and he had a choice because he still had some kids left to raise. And he says in this book, his name is Jerry Sitzer, and the book is called A Grace Disguised. And it's a wonderful book on how he chose to forgive. And it was the most wonderful definition for forgiveness that I've ever heard, which is letting that person off the hook for revenge and allowing God to deal with that person as we let go and trust God. And so because he did that, the Lord healed him, and he was able to take care of his children and in a loving way so that they didn't have the hurt and have that just be passed down from generation to generation. I love the Bible character Joseph. He's my absolute favorite. And the reason I love him and I love his life is it's just so interesting to me. Here he was, 17 years old. God gave him 2 dreams about how his family and even the sun and the stars and the moon were going to bow down to him at 17 years old. And he did not have the wherewithal to keep that to himself. So he's sharing it with his brothers. Brothers are getting a little ticked off because Joseph's dad, Jacob, had already given Joseph a beautiful coat to wear. And now he's saying the brothers are going to bow down to him. And they're like, really? Who do you think you are? And so they devise a plan to sell him into slavery. And they really wanted to kill him, but the oldest brother, Reuben, said, oh, wanting to save him, let's throw him in this well. And then when Reuben was gone at work, the brothers sold him into slavery and told the dad that he had died in an animal accident. Well, Joseph knew that God had big plans for him. He believed it. And yet, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, and Potiphar was an official of the government there in Egypt, and he lived in Potiphar's house for 11 years, and he had favor until he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, in which he was then sold or put into jail. Now, still in jail because he loved God and he lived well and he trusted God, he was found favor with favor. But he was still in that jail for 2 years until the cupbearer and the baker remembered that he knew how to interpret dreams. And the king had had a dream. And because they remembered that, and that was God's sovereignty, meaning God is in control of all things, then Joseph was brought before the king, and he got to interpret the dream, which was talking about famine in the land and that they needed to prepare for that. And so then the king put him over, because of God's favor, over the distribution of the grain and in a huge leadership position in which his brothers did come and bow down to him later. And it's very interesting because sometimes God will tell us things in our life, but they don't come to be right away. Sometimes we have twists and turns, and we wonder, where is God? What is he doing? Why did this happen? Why this? How did this hard thing happen in my life? And yet he is sovereign. Uh, Colossians 1:16 says, God is over all things and he holds all things together. Kind of like those barricades hold things back. He holds all things together in heaven and in earth. Things visible and things invisible. He is a sovereign God. So when we're left exposed and when we don't understand what's going on in our lives, God does. He's sovereign. And sometimes we may not understand something this side of heaven, but we can trust in God's attributes. He's a good God. He cares for us. Romans 8:28 says he works all things together for our good. And many, many, many times he shows us what that good is, that why we had to be overexposed, why we had to go through that hard time, why we had to be hurt beyond what we thought we could bear. And yet he uses that so that we can be a blessing to other people. So just some thoughts that were running through my mind. I want to thank you for listening. This is Linda, Simple Mom, with a simple message. God bless you.